And we're back here at Boom and Bust. I'm your host, Tony Clement, having a continuing discussion with Dr. Marco Navarro-Genie. He's the president of the Haultain Research Institute. Sorry, we were just getting into what's happening in Nicaragua, but please continue with your assessment of the situation there.
Thank you. Yes. So Nicaragua is the furthest thing from a democratic state today, probably the most tyrannical regime in the hemisphere. And the question comes up again: what are the Americans doing about it? Not a thing. There is a kind of embargo, and there's been some sort of restrictions on trade, but other than that, not much going on. And again, there isn't much they can do anyway. But probably the best thing the Americans can do is really stay on the sidelines.
Right.
This is a problem that Nicaraguans have brought onto themselves, and there is a deep sense in the region that they ought to find a solution for themselves.
Well, I mean, you mentioned Ortega. Of course, he's been around for decades in Nicaraguan political life, such as it is, and you've also mentioned this authoritarian history or streak in the region as well. Are the people starting to get fed up with all of this, though?
The people are fed up, but the Ortega regime has become ferociously tyrannical. And people who desire to protest or even voice publicly their opinions of the regime essentially get thrown into dungeons or essentially kicked out of the country in exile and stripped of their nationality, which of course is illegal under international law. So it's going to get worse before it gets better, I'm afraid.
Do you see, what do you see as the future, near term and medium term, in the region?
Nicaragua has also hitched this wagon very closely to Russia. And I think the big risk there is that if and when Russia would lose this war, it would become an even greater pariah, and then Nicaragua and Cuba and those kinds of allies would be even further isolated from the rest of the world. And so it is possible that in the middle of all this suffering, or the suffering that is about to come, if that happens, perhaps they can finally shed their socialist burdens.
We've got a pretty vibrant community or set of communities in Canada now from Latin America. Are they active in the region at all, or are they just staying away from it?
Many are, and they have commercial ties. They're involved in human rights organizations and trying to foster greater peace and greater dialogue. Of course, the spouse of the leader of His Majesty's official opposition is born in Venezuela, political refugee in Canada. She has I think to some extent managed to inspire a great deal of people in the community to become more involved.
Is that so? You're seeing some evidence of that. That's very interesting.
Yes, absolutely. There are sort of quiet rumbles in different networks across the country, excited about the prospect of the Pierre Poilievre becoming the prime minister and having some influence there.
Now, for investors, Canadian investors, and the diaspora as well, is there a way to help out these Latin American countries without bolstering the regimes that are authoritarian?
Perhaps in microcredit operations and the like, which go directly to people. I always advise people to make sure that the organizations who are essentially distributing this kind of aid do as much as possible have small administrative burdens. But the reality is, I would not recommend to most people to invest directly in any of these countries that I mentioned. In Nicaragua, for example, just to mention one, there's absolutely no property guarantees.
Right.
You buy a piece of property, it's yours today. You can have the deed, and somebody can come and squat the next day and it's gone.
Marco, we're going to have to leave it at that. A very interesting discussion. Thanks for sharing your insights on our program today.
Thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure.